All righty. Oh, I should move that brand new box of tissues so my background looks cool. Hold on a second. Okay, so you have found yourself in the introduction to and internal alchemy talk. And so I am inspired to give this talk tonight because we are doing the alchemical immersion program that I debuted back in 2020. How many of you have done that program? Put up an emoji or your actual physical hand or something like that. So yeah, a couple of us have done the entirety of that self-paced course, that like 4-month long self-paced course. And I suppose you enjoyed it since you're here. But one of the reasons for working on this evening is that that's currently in process. And I decided, I think everyone's a little Zoom fried. That's not what I decided, but it's impacting my decision. And like, so I don't really know if people are going to run through the entire 4-month self-paced course this year, like they did in 2020. And that's okay. But I decided to run little 21-day chunks in association with the alchemical immersion course online, so that folks like a lot of you who have done that course before could come and drop in and like get some new spice in these live classes, or people who are doing that course could do that. And then we have a couple of different little live classes throughout the way. So I plan to be doing this schedule for a couple more months, which is a Thursday at the beginning, then a Saturday with my TA Miko, and then she does a Thursday in the middle, and then I do a Saturday at the end to wrap it up. And we're doing them around the curriculum in each module. There's basically 4 modules in that alchemical immersion course. And so I tried to make it so you could do that and then not do anything else, or you could come to these live classes and not do any of that, and they would just be kind of fun and just a way to keep us learning Qigong, an excuse to get together in a little online class and see our friends from Washington and Santa Cruz. And Tina, I don't know where you are right now, but it was a far away. It used to be a while ago.
Yeah.
So
now I'm back. I said now I'm back west, but who knows where I'll be? Like,
who knows? So yeah, by the time this recording is up, you could be in Australia or somewhere epic. So anyway, a fun chance for us to get together. And this this 21 days module is on, in the course, it's the essence of internal alchemy. So I am feeling quite inspired about internal alchemy in general. And so I thought we could do a little talk about an introduction to that, and then some ways to deepen your practice if you've heard of this. So let's maybe ask, who's heard of this concept even? I mean, you did the alchemical immersion course, but have you heard of internal alchemy? What is that? So maybe some ways to deepen your understanding, and also maybe some ways to make it practical. So this is going to be my main point this evening. One of the things you'll know if you've heard of this internal alchemy thing in Taoism is mostly where we get that term from. And I'll even put up the Chinese characters for you because I went and copied and pasted them earlier so I could do that in the chat box. I don't know what the kids at home online will do. Might have to do some video editing later. But anyway, here are these characters. Nei, nei, dan. That's the tones if I got them right. Nei, nei, dan. And this first character, nei, means inner, inside. I think, there's a character of like a little box, and then there's something inside of it. So it means inside. And then the other one is actually a picture of an alchemical cauldron. And then in the middle is a little elixir pill that's being cooked in the alchemical cauldron. So this is the work of Nei, inner, dan, cooking alchemical substances. And it's most popular from Taoism because this is actually where that term comes from. Way back, they started using this. Nobody's exactly sure where the first instance is, but it was about the 10th century. Sometime around the 10th century, the term Neidan came into vogue to talk about internal alchemy. Before that time, there was a lot in ancient China, there was a lot of what we call Waidan, or external alchemy. And this is, you'll still see in traditional Chinese medicine, they have some medicines that have like mercury in them, or cinnabar, mercury oxide is slightly different. I'm still a little wary about such things. But some of these mineral elements come from this ancient time where they were trying to refine these various substances to create elixirs of longevity or immortality or like spiritual insight. And obviously, we can see that that's a continuum from like previous indigenous ventures, you could say. The Taoists were very big on telling you like, oh, which type of cave you should go to find which type of mushroom that confers spiritual immortality. And with a modern eye, you might look at that and go like, oh, of course they were taking mushrooms to achieve spiritual immortality. There's a couple of great books. Gosh, I'm forgetting one, but an author recently went through and compared some of the early Christian mysticism with the Greek mysticism that it inherited, and how it was said, in the Mysteries of Eleusis, it was said that those ceremonies conferred immortality. And what were they doing in those ceremonies? They were taking a drink that basically was made with an early form of LSD in it. And one of the things we know from research from people like Stanislav Grof, is one I'm thinking about a lot lately, is that these states, when they're induced, and people have these not just through drugs, but through breath work, through yoga, through time in nature, but you can have these moments where your personal sense of ego is suspended. And in that vacuum, in floods this sense of like communion with all life, or something like that. There's actually a lot of research on this nowadays in using things like psilocybin mushrooms in hospice, so that people who are afraid of death, they take just the right amount of psilocybin, and then their fear of death goes away, because they feel like, oh, well, that's just a version of me. I'm actually all life. They like, in Buddhism, we call it changing your karmic address. Right? You cease to go, oh no, I don't get mail at P.O. Box Reverend Fajun anymore. Now I'm Mother Gaia as a whole. And so people have this, they have it in near-death experiences. They come back and they go, oh wow, I'm not just here for me, I'm here for all life. And they lose their fear of death. So in some spiritual traditions, that's what they're talking about it when they talk about immortality. They're talking about this. Anyway, don't get me rambling. You know how I can get with a subject I like, but there are all sorts of ways to describe this. But one of the things in the olden days is there was a mix, and you see this just the same in European alchemy, where there was a mix between people who were using the language of alchemy to talk about spiritual processes within. And then there were other folks who were really just trying to like mix together mercury and sulfur and lead, and then take a pill that would make you immortal somehow. Okay, you know how that went, right? And actually, in the Taoist tradition, there are stories of priests who would come and they'd make the immortal pill for these courtiers and stuff like that, and they would take it and then they would croak. And for a while, people were going like, oh yes, their physical body has to die so their spirit body is liberated. But you can see why the language transitioned from physical alchemy to inner alchemy. We went from Waidan into Neidan. And so Neidan is what we are really talking about. And I just think this is so cool. You see it because of how the Silk Road worked. You actually see a back and forth translation between Chinese systems of inner alchemy and Indian systems of inner alchemy. If you want to really nerd out on the history, like way more than you need to, you can read a book called The Alchemical Body. And they talk about some of these metaphors of, quicksilver and sulfur, and how some relate to Shiva and some are related to other deities, and how those are describing yogic processes in your body. And they also describe that some of the things like we'll get into if I can stay on task here. In yogic texts like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is a 14th century text, but we see that its ideas were happening earlier because some of the same ideas are in Buddhist tantras that went to Tibet earlier. But there's this notion of reversing the sexual energy in the body, that the sexual energy wants to go down and out. And these yogis believed that that would sort of like drain your vitality. And so they said, oh, you got to make that go backwards. And historically, a lot of historians now think that that idea, which is like a foundation stone of yoga, may have come from Taoist China along the Silk Road and vice versa. So it's really hard to say what was Indian yoga and what was Chinese yoga. And then as well, I was trained a bit in Sufi lineage, which is India goes into its next door neighbors into the Middle East. And that becomes a large part of the Greek tradition, which becomes a large part of the European Christian mystical tradition. And so it's really hard to say that the 10th century alchemists of medieval Christendom weren't practicing Taoist methods that just got translated through India and turned into Sufism, but the Sufis and the Christian mystics all know they're doing the same stuff, and it just went right on over to Europe. But what all of them have in common is taking the language of external alchemy and treating it as a metaphor for spiritual processes, but not just spiritual processes. We should say embodied spiritual processes. So, because you can do spirituality in a way that is life negative, or you could do spirituality in a way that is aimed toward disembodiment. But we should know that the alchemical tradition, at least after those one guys who said you have to kill your physical body with lead and mercury so you could go to the spirit realm, everywhere after that, it's a tradition of embodiment of spiritual processes. And so this gets me to my first bullet point for you in the introduction to internal alchemy. That was all just fun history while we were all getting here, and a nice little romp along the Silk Road. But first point is, what I would like to suggest is you think of inner alchemy as intentionally evoking sensations and states. Intentionally evoking sensations and states. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means, have any of you ever done a gratitude practice? You ever done a gratitude practice, gratitude journal, or just like gratitude meditation? Okay, then you'll probably know that if you can get in the pocket. Now, sometimes my struggle with gratitude practice sometimes has been that, like, if I'm feeling really ungrateful, it's hard to find neutral and shift into another gear. But you'll know on the days when you can get into the pocket and you're like, oh man, what would I do without so-and-so? I'm so grateful they're in my life. Your physical body changes based on that thing that you just thought. Does that make sense? Have you felt this? And sometimes you're thinking about, oh, I'm so grateful for so-and-so, and you just spontaneously imagine them hugging you or something like that. And your body changes as if you were feeling that hug. It's really quite neat. So this is part of this process of inner alchemy. But one of my goals today is to put it in terms that we can understand, because there are all sorts of mystical associations. They say, oh, creating the subtle body that can travel outside the physical body is a point of inner alchemy and all kinds of stuff. But I can't really demonstrate that to you or have somebody test that in a lab, right? So if you want to train for 30 years, maybe you'll demonstrate it to yourself. But what I want to talk about is things that are like demonstrable. And so a very powerful version of inner alchemy would be something like, I did it today. I did my alchemy practice. It was looking at cute animal videos on TikTok. Oh yeah, looking at cute animal videos on TikTok. You know why? Well, because somebody was like, they even said, they set me up for it. They were like, oh, sometimes life gets you down, but I've got this little serotonin generator, and it's this kitty cat like getting belly rubs. And my whole body reacted as if, I mean, not quite, like 70%, as if I had a little kitty cat there to give belly rubs to. And what you would notice if you were, I don't know, like testing my galvanic skin conductance or my sinus heart variability thing, HRV, whatever that stands for. If you were testing like my breath rate or something like that, is that I just got a relaxation response induced in my body, right? My brain probably started pumping out oxytocin. My vagus nerve switched from the fight, flight, freeze one to the social engagement and curiosity one. And all of this physiological stuff happened from me watching somebody else pet their cat on TikTok. Whoa. So what's really neat, what we're finding out, you probably know if you made it to this class, you're probably into all sorts of mind body stuff. But it's the same thing where they did tests with like having people do free throws in their basketball versus visualizing themselves do the free throws in the basket. And the visualizers were like almost as good as the physical. They were like 95% as good as the physical practicers, right? That's pretty neat. So in the Qigong tradition, we have all of this stuff where like they have exercises where you'll sit there and just visualize yourself doing your Qigong. And it's felt that that has, well, in our case, we say it's not a lesser effect, it's just a different effect. But you could even think like it has almost the same effect as physically moving yourself through those Qigong exercises. So we are intentionally evoking sensations and states. So when I look at the little kitty cat on the TV, or if I do gratitude and I imagine my friend in my mind, it evokes sensations in my body, the sensations of getting a hug, the sensations of the unique relaxation response that scientists have studied, that when a cat purrs on you, it like puts your body into a healing harmonic frequency. So weird. And just by imagining that or viewing that, that comes on in my body. Pretty neat. Then we have things where, like in the Buddhist tradition and the Taoist tradition as well, they have different gazes that you'll use for meditation. So there's an old Taoist text where they say something, it says something like, oh, before my meditation seat, I have a curtain. If things are too bright, I lower it. If things are too dark, I raise it. But secretly, they're talking about your eyelids. And so if your mind is too chittery, chattery, you aim your gaze 45 degrees down and you half close your eyelids. But if your mind is too sleepy, you look forward or even up, not too long on those ups, but you look forward or up, and it changes your state of consciousness by doing this little physical movement. So what's really neat is we have the three. If you watched last month's video, which is up on my YouTube now, which was Introduction to Qigong, I think was what we called it. I went over what's also in the alchemical immersion, that in our system we have, it comes from a Chinese Buddhist system into Chinese Qigong. We have mudra, mantra, and mandala. In this case, meaning things you do with your body, things you do with your breath, speech, or thought words, and things that you imagine, mental imagery that you can imagine. And all three of these tools become ways that you intentionally evoke sensations or states, right? So let's do a quick practice if you don't mind, because I figured I would get a little practice done too while we're here tonight. This is my favorite one right now. It's from EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. It's from that tradition. But I'm here to tell you that ain't nothing but inner alchemy. So you're going to make your hands like this. This is called the butterfly hug. So you make a little butterfly if you want. It can also be any kind of position of a self hug you want, but I like the little butterfly. You put them here, and then you're going to tap, and you do whatever pace feels good to you. And apparently, just like that EMDR where your eyes are going back and forth, this helps to kind of like get your brain hemispheres to cool down. And then if you want, invoke like an affirmation or a feeling you'd like to cultivate. So it could be like, may I be safe, or you could cultivate a sense of relaxation, or some affirmation or practice you're working on. And then when it feels good, you can let that just slow to a pause and leave your hands on there. They could be in this position, or they could go into a hand on heart, or even into a self hug. And these are all actually well researched. Oh, I'm going to do the hug myself. These are well researched mudras that evoke states within us, states of compassion, self care. So just take a moment. If you like, you can imagine giving yourself love, or just feel that self hug, or even imagine that some beautiful other is giving you this comfort and containment. And then when you're ready, finish it up. Well, that one felt good. That felt good. All right. What do you think? Do you like it? Butterfly hug, and self hug. So I choose these because they've been researched to, actually help people lower their anxiety, increase their self-compassion. And we just did inner alchemy because, at least according to Reverend Fajun's definition, inner alchemy is intentionally evoking sensations or states. I love how we just got two cats came onto screen at the same exact moment when we were doing the imagine someone there nourishing you. They waited till I stopped talking about cats, or else that would be real synchronistic. But they both showed up at exactly the same time. So these are some practices. We used mudra in that case, but you could use mantra. You could, there's one that the founder of somatic experiencing, Peter Levine, likes to use, which is he has his clients do the sound voo. And so if you want, you can try this. And they just go voo. Then you just notice, like, that was very calmative for me. So some of you, as I was doing that, I was getting an image of singing in choir at church, and just that, like, those controlled exhalations in community, like while we were all toning Vu together, that just came up in my mind. And if you ever did that, you did inner alchemy at church. Don't tell the patriarchy. They're not ready to know the truth, but it's true. Okay, maybe it wasn't intentional, but you evoked state experiences through using body, speech, or mind. Okay, so this is the beginning of our introduction to inner alchemy. And the slogan I want you to have, this comes from one of my lamas who often says, the first job of the practitioner is to regulate their state. The first job of the practitioner is to regulate their state. I always want to be cautious not to get too kind of new age about this, because that rapidly flops over into blame the victim sometimes. There are circumstances that make it very difficult to regulate our state. Do you relate? Have you ever been in those? I've been in those. And so we try not to blame ourselves or others and go, oh, you're not a practitioner. You're not regulating your state. Oh, you rascal. But I personally have found, this is just through my own experience, but some of the research and meditators that I've seen bears this out, that even when like I had an experience coming out of retreat at one point that left me with an anxiety disorder, like doing that vaccine didn't do anything to me, but Buddhist meditation retreat messed me up really bad one time. But I at least had enough like Zen training that I could notice myself going, okay, here's all this sensation. Here's all these terrible thought words. I'm not going to get anything done today. And if I could put my mind in the place of self-compassion and acceptance, the suffering part went away. That was really intriguing to me. I would like for all of the rest of it to go away sometimes too, but it was really intriguing that that was a way that I could be responsible for my state, even though I couldn't be responsible for everything else. I couldn't be responsible for my heart rate, couldn't be, as far as I was able, I tried everything that I could figure out at that time. And so very similarly, we might be in a ongoing global pandemic and rapid inflation. And like, for me, all of my best buddies who I used to have taco dates, they now they live somewhere else. And so I got to find a whole new crew of like taco buddies, but within that, I can still be responsible for my state. And knowing a bit about inner alchemy is what allows us to do that, because we can understand that maybe not 100%, but to the degree that we're in charge of our intentions, we have our handles on what sensations and states we are evoking. We have the handles on what sensations and states we're evoking. So the practitioner's first job, according to the yogic tradition, a yogi's first job is to learn to regulate your state. All right. Second piece. First, a couple of examples. So this is the mind-body connection. And what's really fun these days is that the things we can demonstrate are like halfway in between the like, you'll form a subtle body and be a dream sorcerer like Dr. Strange. Like, that's cool. Can't demonstrate that in the lab. But it's not just, oh, you'll be able to cope with life a little better. Like, they have now measured, these inner fire yogis, right? The Dumo yogis used to be kind of mythological. Oh, somewhere in Tibet, these yogis claim they can raise their body heat. Well, some of them sat there with a thermometer measuring their core temperature. And in spite of that, they were able to go into meditation and raise their core temperature in the snow through meditative methods. This is a very powerful version of intentionally invoking sensations and states. This is an application of the inner alchemy. Why? Because how they do that is they use their imagination to generate the sensation of heat so strongly that their body then believes it. It's really, really neat. And they have these competitions in some of the yogic schools of like how many wet towels you can dry in the snow, right? This is, I guess, fun for when you're a monk, but it's really neat that when we're talking about this inner alchemy stuff, there are measurable phenomena by which you get your body to believe your mind. And it's all through the intentional evoking of those sensations. That's what has that influence on your physiology. What are a couple of the other ones here? There's also lesser known, there's inner cooling yoga. So that was inner heat yoga. There's also an inner cooling yoga, learning how to regulate your body temperature through evoking specific states. Obviously, emotional self-regulation. We've talked about this a little bit. And then as well, another one, just to keep it spicy, is in Taoist sexual practice. We mentioned earlier that reversing the Ganges River that came into the Indian yoga, likely from reversing the Yellow River in Taoist sources. But how they do that, don't tell anyone I told you the secret or even talked about such subjects on the internet. But how they do that is they intentionally expand the sensations that are localized around the reproductive organs and learn to feel those sensations at other places in their body. So a lot of time for people with penises, that means that they learn to actually transfer all the sensation way up to their head so that they're unlikely to have an orgasm. Men have a harder time cultivating multiple orgasms in general. And so they actually just transfer all that sensation. But how they do it is they intentionally evoke sensations up here. And then what's interesting is that the physical body responds. They no longer, just to talk frankly, like they no longer have an urgency to have an orgasm. physically, to ejaculate. Don't tell the Republican Congress members that I mentioned actual sex ed for free in a public forum. But they just think about the top of their head, and then they don't have to ejaculate anymore. It's like, that's weird. Like, if somebody had taught me that in high school, man, that would have been great to know. Then similarly, for people without penises, for people with vulvas in general, and the way it's taught, it's usually about expanding the sensation throughout the entire body. Some people naturally have orgasms that way, but they learn to use the breath and the mind to expand sensation all the way up to the fingertips, to expand sensation above the head and below the feet. And then all of a sudden, the physiological response actually happens in a much different way. So hopefully that, I don't know, gives you a pep talk or somebody later on the YouTube, why inner alchemy is cool and tangible. It's actually quite there are tangible phenomena that you can evoke from this. Obviously, a number of us have also heard of placebo response and nocebo response, which is where, you take the tests they usually do, or they give you a sugar pill instead of the headache remedy. And a number of those people are going to have benefit to their headaches anyway, just because their mind thought they should. So we test everything against placebo, because a certain degree, and then nocebo is the opposite, right? We tell you, oh, this pill is meant to you'll have these side effects. And a number of people, even though it's just a sugar pill, have those side effects anyway, even though they weren't ingesting what they thought they were ingesting. So in that case, that's not internal alchemy, because you're not intentionally evoking sensations or states, but it shows the power between the place where those intentions happen, the mind or the spirit, to have an influence on your physiology. Okay, so there's your first point, and then we only have really one more to go, and we'll have done a class tonight, and it will have been really fun. So intentionally evoking, IESS. It wasn't an acronym that said anything this time, bummer, but you could say that sound. It surely evoked something in me when I said it. So choose your mantras wisely, guys. Okay. And then, so intentionally evoking sensations and states, and the first task of a yogin is to regulate your state. You're in charge of that. And then, just in case, I don't know, I'm into this point lately because a lot of teachers in human potentials and consciousness, they teach things in a way that easily can flop over into like victim blaming and stuff. And sometimes, I actually read a great book. If you are feeling like really nerdy, you can read Altered Traits by Daniel Goleman and another one, maybe Richard Davidson, I think. But they're talking about like what we've measured in what meditation can do to folks, like in long-term meditators, short meditators, like what traits can you change in yourself? And one of the authors was talking about how we have measured that like doing meditation can consistently lower your blood pressure. That's pretty neat. I found that out when I was first starting to teach private Qigong clients, and I had some who were coming to, and they would do their Qigong, and they actually had to reduce their blood pressure medication because their blood pressure would plummet by doing their practices. It was really neat. But this author talks about it, how they for years felt like a failure because they were doing all this meditation and they could not get that blood pressure down. And then they figured out it's just some genetic anomaly in their kidneys. And so we should have this kind of compassion that if like, oh, I'm doing my inner heat yoga and I still haven't transformed suffering into a full body orgasm, darn it. Sometimes we just need to take a little methylfolate or L-theanine or even your medications. And that's just fine. But we can still be responsible for the states that we are responsible for. And the way the Lama puts it, that I just want to, hopefully this isn't harping on it too much for you, it's just in my own heart lately. But the way the Lama puts it is that if you're not responsible for your state, there's a lot of other people who would like to be, mostly advertisers and politicians. So, it could really benefit us to learn to be responsible for our state, because how do we get you to buy things? How do we get you to vote is usually drumming up certain types of upset. And then we do a little bait and switch. We go, this is the answer. And when in stress, your system doesn't think all that clearly about whether that really is the answer, or whether they've proposed a false connection or a correlation instead of causation or things like that. Okay, end of rant. Thank you. Parte number dos. The second aspect of internal alchemy I'd like you to know in tonight's class is the cultivating of elixirs, the cultivating of elixirs. So this is really kind of a deepening from the intentional evocation of sensations and states. It all comes back to that. But we can get a little specific. In the world of Qigong, this is often where you go from visualizing just energies flowing through the body, and you actually start to, there's a specific class in the Qigong and the inner yogas where you start to concentrate the energies, or you make little condensations and like inner elixirs out of them. What I want to talk about with you, I mentioned in last month's class, and I think it's really, really cool. There's research. One of the books I do recommend, you don't have to be a real nerd to want to read this one. It's called The Upside of Stress. The Upside of Stress. It's by Kelly McGonigal, researcher at Stanford, and an excellent writer, in my opinion. And one of the things that she references is that she has the whole first chapter is really kind of cool. I'll let you read it, but in brief, basically it's, what we've been taught about stress is like half right. We get taught, oh, stress is going to break you down and it's going to, mess you up, and don't get too stressed out. Stress, it's a killer, heart rate and kidney disease and blah, 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 blah. Right. And she does a great job of going like, think of all the places you've heard that. Like if you ever watched Oprah, like I did after school with my mom, on a sick day or something, that was back in the day when Deepak Chopra was starting to come on and Dr. Weil were starting to come on. And there was this message coming out of like, oh, stress. We found it. We found the cause of society's ills. It's stress. And what it turns out in the research she cites is that stress can be harmful, but it can also really augment your health. Some of the most stressed people are also some of the healthiest people on planet Earth. Read the research. I can't do it justice here with my little brain, but it's in there. And the thing that makes the difference is why we're including this in the Introduction to Inner Alchemy class, because how you think about the stress is a major determinant of how it affects your body. How you think about the stress is a major, like major determinant of how it affects your body. One little sidetrack, I was just reminded in a course I took a couple of weeks ago, I'm re-upping my herbalism training. And I was doing a course on women's health, and the teacher, Aviva Ram, very, very cool teacher, has a number of cool books out, but was reminding us that, again, it's not 100%, but what we've been taught about what a menstrual cycle or menopause should feel like accounts for a significant percentage of what those things end up feeling like for women. It's like, you wouldn't think that, right? And definitely if there are male identified folks like me, if your friend complains of cramps, don't tell them that. Like, well, what are your beliefs? No, that's a jerk move. But if you want to work on yourself, like some of the stuff in women's circle was like, what did we learn about our menses? Did we learn anything? What did we learn about? Like, that is really powerful in how it actually affects your physical health. Just the way you believe about it, just the way you believe about it. It's super neat. Okay, similarly, what you believe about stress determines how it affects you physiologically. And why I wanted to bring this up in the elixir section is one of the first things that McGonigal mentions is that they did a study where for some of the folks, so part of the study, they like have them do a stressful task. I think it's like giving a speech to people who don't give any facial response. It's like one of the, in the research field, apparently that's one of the most stressful things you can do to a human, is make them give a talk and have everybody just sit there flat of affect and not smile or frown or anything. Okay, and I'm a minister in the time when everybody has to wear a mask during my sermon. Oh, it's terrible. So I make them like do hallelujah and stuff. It's a Unitarian church, but I make them do it anyway, because otherwise that would be awful. Anyway, so they're going to make them do that. But half of the folks watch this video about how stress enhances your body, how stress enhances you. And it's like 3 minutes. And those folks, when they tested them later, the first group, I'll try to gloss this really quick, but the first group, the main stress hormone, cortisol, right? And cortisol does, if left to its own devices, kind of break you down over the long term. That's why you can't get too many of those steroid shots for your shoulder or things like that. But the folks who believe that stress is enhancing them, in addition to cortisol, they also put out DHEA. And apparently, when you mix the two together, now do you see the alchemical reference? When you mix the two together, it becomes like this healing elixir on your body. It's super weird. So read the book, but I'll give you the punchline. When you believe that stress enhances you, your nervous system pumps out these enhancement chemicals that actually makes stress enhance you. It blew me away. It absolutely blew me away. So it's like you are making an elixir. What have you done? You've taken, so let's take the old European alchemical analogy of like taking base materials or caustic, lead, caustic, poisonous stuff. And then you add something to it, bloop, 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 and all of a sudden it turns into the medicine of longevity. This is an alchemical process. It comes with a mantra. Okay, so we did a mudra. Now here's your mantra. This stress is enhancing me. This stress is enhancing me. And all you have to do is learn to do that mantra, and you have to actually believe it, right? To invoke that kind of the same thing as a placebo power. But if you want to get convinced, then go and read that book, and then you'll believe it. Physical challenges, long distance running. The stress is enhancing me. Yeah. And long distance running, there's an alchemical agent to that, because when you push past your resistance, that's when your brain puts out all the anandamide, all the stuff that most people have to smoke weed to get. Distance runners get it from going, you know what, this sucks right now, but if I keep going and endure, and then all of a sudden, like, you're having that unitive experience. You became an immortal for the last 6 miles of your run or something like that. So, and it doesn't mean, let's bring it back down to, it doesn't mean that just thinking that is going to make sure you never get a knee injury or something like that. But it does make me wonder, how far might that go to preventing a knee injury? Or to, as we know, like in acupuncture, sometimes some of the research that I remember is we take an fMRI or take an MRI or something. It's not that the structure has changed, but the person's subjective experience of pain is totally different. What's going on there? We don't know. So anyway, so this stress is enhancing me. Let me finish us up. So that was just add DHEA. Just add DHEA, and all of a sudden your cortisol turns from poison to medicine. Really trippy. The other one she mentions in her book is that you can also add oxytocin. You remember the cuddle hormone, right? It's first was started as like the pair bonding hormone, but it's involved in orgasm, it's involved in childbirth, all this kind of stuff. If you're under stress and you can generate compassion, the oxytocin that you put out has a moderating effect on the cortisol as well, that actually can make it like cardiovascular protective. So you're having a stress response and your cardiovascular system is getting stronger because you added a little compassion into the mix. It's super cool what we're capable of. And so hopefully these, read her book, or just if this resonates with you, then just take it in. You don't have to do that homework. It's not mandatory. But it's to give you this idea that when we say the yogi's responsible for their own state, it's not only possible, but it's for some very important reasons, because we're kind of going about through our life thinking that maybe something else is responsible for our state. And bummer of bummers, because we think that, it's true. So if we have the chance to think that we can be responsible for at least a significant percentage of our state, and then we have a couple of tricks to get in there and start to pull the levers and move the alchemical little saucepans and stuff like that, then we have the capacity to make elixirs within ourselves. We have the capacity to make elixirs within ourselves. So this is the main thing that I wanted to present to you as an introduction to inner alchemy. We got the historical, right? And it comes down to us through our Chinese herbalism. In the tantric yogas, we visualize different colored lights making little elixirs in the body. We do all this kind of stuff. But ultimately what it amounts to is being able to intentionally evoke sensations and states, as well as to start to master the production of elixirs within our body and mind. And where the body mind, is there a division? We're not so sure. But when we cultivate the elixirs, what are they? They're things like gratitude. They're things like compassion. They're things like the idea that this stress is enhancing me. Why? Because I say so. Like we evoke agency within ourselves, and we have the capacity to make alchemical elixirs within. Okay, the last point, relating this then to our Qigong. In the alchemical immersion, our basic level Qigong, we have 3 inner alchemy processes that we do. And I just wanted to put them in this class so you know how this talk relates to that practice. They are the inner smile, the 6 healing sounds, and the visualization of color, colored lights within the internal organs, and the microcosmic orbit, what's called a small heavenly circulation in the classics. So inner smile, 6 healing sounds, and small heavenly circulation. So what are we doing in these? The inner smile is basically the same thing we did with that butterfly hug. It's just kind of got a Chinese medicine order to it. You go through the control cycle of the internal organs, and you're like blessing them with compassion, and it's supposed to be regulating those organs at the same time in a more qigong-y way than if you're just kind of blasting yourself with compassion. But it's the same type of medicine. It invokes the same type of states. Okay, the 6 healing sounds, we're doing a physiological method. What's cool, I just figured this out in the last few years because I love the 6 healing sounds. They work really well for me. But no, I don't think any big pharmaceutical company has done a study on like, the efficacy of the 6 healing sounds in regulating heat disorder. Like, I don't know. But what I just figured out, I was thinking like, well, how might these things be working? Well, they're working on a well-known phenomenon in breath work, which is the 2-1 ratio breathing. When you breathe out twice as long as you breathe in, it tends to regulate your vagal tone and put you into a relaxation response, shift you out of sympathetic and into parasympathetic. So a lot of time they recommend in for 3 and out for 6. And so when we're doing the 6 healing sounds, happens at about that ratio. It's really kind of interesting. The other things that they do is that, well, you may feel like I feel there's a type of like, they say there's like a mouth reflexology that's behind the science of mantra and stuff. And so when I go, you can try this along if you want, when you go, it feels different than when you go, like for me, the s kind of went this way and the shu kind of went that way today. And that feels different than if you go, ooh, I like that one the best. But they're also, these sounds are associated with the different qualities of the elements in traditional Taoism and Chinese medicine. And so the s sound is like drawing your sword, and the sh sound is like the breeze through the trees, and the sound is like a cave in the earth, and the sound is like a crackling campfire, and the sound is like the waves of the water going over the little waterfall. And they bring these associations. So when you're doing the practice, when you inhale, and then they add this colored light, when you inhale that white light in, and you make the sound, and you're feeling this metal quality transforming from grief to surrender, and from surrender into honor, you're intentionally invoking states and sensations very powerfully. You're stacking up all of these tools. As well, in your class, you'll see that they make shapes. So they go like this. Also well researched, but we're out of time, so I won't tell you all about it. But there's a whole science of like making yourself big staves off depression in your mind. So if you're trying to regulate the organ in Chinese medicine associated with grief, what posture might you want to do to stave off grief? It's really cool. Similarly, the water one, you round in, and I was always taught that was meant to emphasize your kidneys. But similarly, the wisdom of the water element is this deep stillness. It's this wintertime energy of going in and becoming still. And so your whole body does this inward thing. So you're making these shapes, you're visualizing these colors, and they're meant to evoke a state experience within you. It's really pretty neat. Okay, then our last one, of course, is the microcosmic orbit. And if you go along with that curriculum, you'll feel, like when you put your mind on these little points in the head, they definitely invoke sensations. They definitely invoke states. When you put your mind on these little points in the heart, they invoke states. But similarly, nowadays, the way I teach the microcosmic a lot of the time is, I call it the Brene Brown microcosmic orbit, because she has this slogan that she borrowed from someone else. Maybe I should credit them. I don't remember who it was though, but she says soft front, strong back. And so there's a whole thing in that. And this is really related to what these meridians are supposed to do. And they'll have, so they'll have you breathe in down the front. And you can imagine that your whole front channel is softening. Your heart softens, your belly softens all the way down to the reproductive organs, the pelvic floor. They soften and fill. And then when you breathe up the back, there's this sense of like transcendence and like regality and just this almost like chills or inspiration up the spine. And in some systems, when they do the microcosmic orbit, what they're doing, the reason why we're using these parts of the body with visualization and sensation is to evoke those qualities of learning how to inhale vulnerably and to exhale and radiate with inspiration. And these are inner alchemical processes. So those ones in the alchemical immersion are the basic ones, your most basic ones, but they set the stage. Like if you have taken any of my classes on Taoist sexual inner yoga, we always say you learn to do the 6 healing sounds in the microcosmic first. And that relates in Qigong theory to sort of like clearing up the energetic system. But in the version that I've taught you today, you could think of it as you want to learn to evoke specific sensations and states before you try to do that in more powerful contexts, like working with sexuality or relationship, where those energies are quite wild. So these are the preliminaries to those, and they're the preliminaries to other advanced trainings. Well, we filled up a whole hour. Gosh, I never wondered if I would be able to talk for an hour straight. I knew I had it in me all along, but hopefully this has been interesting to you. We don't have time to do Q&A today. I actually have to run off to another meeting, but you can, if you're in the alchemical immersion, which how to get there is on the front page of my website, templestyle.com. You can go into that second module. You can jump right in there. You don't have to do module 1. You can jump right into the second module. They all work on their own just fine. And feel free to use the Q&A comment section in that self-paced course. If you do have questions that come up, if you are looking for what Qigong to do or what kind of practice to do, take what struck you from this class and go back and put it in those practices that you learned and see if they feel different from that different mindset. I've given you like 5 different books to read in your copious free time. And I really hope that you've had a good time here. It's been nice to see you. It's been nice to see your kitty cats reconnect, and do feel free to reach out and reconnect. And I can't wait to see you next time. All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. See you soon.